Okay. We will get started here, see if any folks trickle in, but we'll get started with the group we have for now. Welcome everyone to our December meeting, December stakeholder meeting of the Capital District Clean Communities Coalition. Got a few things on the agenda this afternoon, so should have some good presentations here. Real quick, go through the agenda. We'll start with some introductions just so we can see who's all on the call and in here in person. We're going to have a presentation from Brandon Smith on the Charge at Work Workplace Charging Program. Todd Bobosi from CDRPC is going to give a brief presentation on the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. I'm going to speak a little bit about our draft coalition strategic plan that if you've been on these meetings for the few times this year, we've kind of talking about that. So we've got that to a draft stage. And then I've got a few other updates from the coalition, and then we can pass it around the table if there's any local updates. So I'll get started just with introductions. Jacob Beeman, Senior Transportation Planner here at the Transportation Council and Director of the Capital District Clean Communities Coalition. I figure I'll pass it around the room internally, and then I can maybe throw it to the folks online. David, you wanna?
David Borton, solar cell boats, carbon-free marine transportation.
Tara Donadio, Capital District Regional Planning Commission, Clean Energy Communities and Climate Smart Communities Outreach Coordinator.
Josh Drano, Capital District Regional Planning Commission, Clean Energy Communities and Climate Smart Communities Outreach Coordinator.
Todd Bobosi, Capital District Regional Planning Commission, Director of Sustainability.
We'll go online. Brandon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Smith. I'm an electrification and decarbonization consultant with EV Noir, assisting with the Cal Start Charge at Work program. So looking forward to speaking with you all.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Simon. I'm a transportation planner here at the Transportation Council, and I help Jacob with Clean Communities work.
Haley.
Hi, everyone. Haley Balkanoff with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, and along with Josh and Tara, I'm an outreach coordinator for Clean Energy Communities and Climate Smart Communities programs.
Mary Ellen.
I'm Mary Ellen Malia, Director of Sustainability at the University of Albany.
And Lawrence. Lawrence? Okay, we have Lawrence Darko online as well. So with that, introductions. First on the agenda, we have Brandon. So I am going to pass it over to you if you want to share your screen. And you can take it away from here.
All right, everyone. Are you able to see my screen okay? It should be a small Tesla in the back.
Yes.
Awesome. So again, my name is Brandon Smith, and I'm here for the Charge at Work program. I'm a consultant with EV Noir focused on decarbonization and electrification. We're working with Cal Start on a national DOE funded program called Charge at Work. So I just wanted to talk to you all a little bit about it, kind of explain what it is, what the benefits are, and then how we can assist in this program. So first off, we have basically the Charge at Work program is going to be something where different companies, whether you're a small company or a large company, can actually pledge to be more green and more eco-friendly. I know a lot of you all are already involved in this process, so thank you for that. So we'll talk just a little bit more about how we can do that. First, we'll talk about the need for workplace charging. Next, we'll talk about the new normal, where kind of workplace charging is the norm, why you should kind of get ahead of the curve before everybody else in adopting workplace charging, and what is the benefit to you, your workplace, your community, and your workers, which is very important. Next, we'll talk about how we can help. And we want to get you to a place where installing workplace charging is easy. Although we can't guarantee it will be super simple process, it is something that we have a lot of experience with We want to help to assist any kind of businesses with applying for this workplace charging program, and really just kind of overall getting a holistic look at their electrification plan and helping with that. Next, we'll touch on what you can do, what the steps are that you can take, what kind of resources that you may be able to partake in if you want to get involved in this program. I'm also going to talk about an eval certification program, which is a complementary program to the Charge at Work program. They kind of go hand in hand. One is a different step in the process where you can get blue ribbon certified, kind of like the LEED program for businesses, where you're able to kind of get two different certifications to really put you ahead of the game in terms of being a progressive workplace. So we'll move on here. So again, we'll talk kind of about the need. So forecasts for electric vehicles sales in the United States will reach 40 to 50% by 2030. I know we've heard a lot of different projections, and there's different kind of negative news recently in the news, but we're looking at 40 to 50% realistic with all the challenges that we may face with the charging infrastructure by 2030. So that's a huge number for us. That's not just kind of the projections. Within 2022 and 2023, we've really started to see EV adoption ramp up. As a matter of fact, the battery electric vehicle registrations through the third quarter of 2023, ending in September, amounted to 852,904. That's just new registrations. That's 61% more than it was last year. And EVs are now about 7.4% of the total US vehicle market. And that's up from 5.2% at the same time in 2022. So pretty exciting to see there. EVs are wanted all around the world. We have a lot of competition in China, a lot of competition in Europe, but absolutely American drivers want EVs. They help with the climate, they help with clean air, they help with consumer pocketbooks. The benefits are well documented and well known. They also help with cleaner health environments, greater local energy independence, lower fuel and maintenance costs for owners. Obviously, I have a car that takes about $120 to fill up the gas tank. With the EV that I drive, it takes about $20 to fill that up. And it goes pretty quick now with DC fast charging. So there's some significant benefits to your workers, even to, the employees and the people that come to frequent your business. And then we also have, just from adopting EVs, a stronger, more technically advanced and competitive economy with less reliance on oil. We'll talk a little bit more about why workplace charging. So currently, most polls show that about 74% of current EV owners express a strong interest in workplace charging. I'll go step back just a little bit. So obviously, people can charge at home, they can charge at the different stations that are around their neighborhood, but a lot of time people commute from home to work, maybe a few errands in between, but one place that you're probably going if you commute to work every day is work. So about 74% of EV drivers do express a desire for workplace charging. At the same time, 60% of EV drivers need chargers at work, either because they have long commutes and no access to charging at home. I mean, installing a home charger isn't the most expensive thing in the world, but you have to think not everybody really has that upfront capital to have it. So having workplace charging will really benefit a lot of people. This may be the people that just live in apartments or people that just don't have the money up front to get that installed. So workplace charging can help bridge the gaps for people that are kind of hesitant to adopt EVs, employees that would like to drive an EV, but don't really have the access to the infrastructure at home or in their neighborhood. So it can definitely help with that. And a lot of Americans want it. EV charging benefits in the workplace. We talked a little bit more about this earlier. But when increasing demand and adoption comes, the workplace is going to be one of the key kind of pillars of how we tackle EV adoption in America. If we can really establish, hey, we have workplace charging, we have chargers at most of the workplaces that people go, more people can feel comfortable to adopting these. It's a benefit to you too as an employer. You have happier employees who want to stay with your company. Pretty soon workplace charging will be expected as an amenity and not just like a privilege. A similar company, you have a smaller company carbon footprint that'll help you meet sustainability standards or sustainability goals. That also goes in hand with our eval certification, which I'll speak a little bit about later. Companies lead on sustainability and conservation. They often enjoy good reputations. It's just kind of something that puts you up there as being an early adopter of something that's going to really change the world. Workplace charging helps put more EVs on the world, on the road and in the world, and helps to kind of reduce our carbon footprint. And again, less dependency on oil. We have more healthier air, cleaner local communities, and I'll talk a little bit more about equity. So depending on where your workplaces are, this can also help you to contribute to a more equitable society when we're talking about energy justice. EV should be accessible to all, again, with energy justice, not just workers that, can afford the expensive Tesla and the expensive charging at home. But if we really want a robust ecosystem of EVs, we're really gonna have to open this up and make it more accessible to everyone. So I'll speak a little bit more about the Justice 40 campaign. So as part of the eval program and the Charge at Work program, we work heavily with trying to make sure that a lot of this infrastructure is being built in Justice 40 communities. So the map that you see here, and I'll describe it a little bit, but the red areas there are areas where you see heavy populations of EV chargers, but the yellow areas, we call these typical EV deserts. There's typically not chargers within any kind of reasonable way. So we want to make sure that these chargers aren't just hitting the Beverly Hills, aren't just hitting the Manhattans of the world. We want to make sure that these chargers are getting everywhere into communities that really need these access. According to a 2022 study, and we're waiting for the 2023 study to come out, the Pew Research Center shows that 43% of Americans lack access to public electric vehicle charging and infrastructure. So again, as we spoke of earlier, having workplace charging as an alternative to infrastructure within your community or at home will be a big step. That means that they don't have charging within 10 miles. So that is, maybe not so difficult if you have a long commute, but if you have a shorter commute and you can't find charging, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to go further away just to get charging. So we want to see if workplaces can really fill in this gap for a lot of people. Disadvantaged communities, obviously, are something that we want to work with heavily. EV Noir does a lot of work with climate equity, with climate justice, and just making sure that communities aren't left behind as we transition into our electrification future. So I'll talk a little bit more specifically about the Charge at Work program. So the Charge at Work program, again, is a national DOE funded program. We work hand in hand with CalSTART to produce outreach and to do ride and drives, introduce different people to electric vehicles. Recently, I just got back from Alabama, where were we? Pensacola, Florida, Alabama, and a number of places in the South where we faced a lot of opposition just to adopting electric vehicles. So it's always really cool to hear that opposition. It's really cool to see, what people are adopting electric vehicles, especially now with the advent of electric trucks like the Rivian, the F-150, and the Chevy Silverado. We're starting to see a lot more people pick this up. So the Charge at Work program specifically is about bringing charging to work and helping people get there. We can walk you through creating a whole workplace charging plan. We can inform you on incentives, workplace EV charging, whether these be rebates you can get from the government on installing the chargers or incentives on your electricity bill with the different municipalities that are in your area. So we work a lot with these companies to just be able to bring them to an easier transition in kind of what is the wild, wild west of electrification right now. We also provide technical assistance. We can tell you about what chargers you need, what levels chargers, how to get these installed, what is trench shoring. We can kind of walk you through this whole process of how that works. How much will this cost? I know if you're a business owner, the first thing you're going to know is how this costs. So we've actually started working on a workplace charging tool. I'll tell you a little bit more about this. So we have a workplace charging tool, a resource center, and a project builder, which will allow you to kind of just walk through the process very easy. And I want to show you some screenshots of kind of what that will look like. So you can start your project very simple. You can tell us about your organization. You can share your workplace details, choose your chargers, plan your financing. So again, we want to know exactly how much all of this is going to cost. So we want you to electrify your workplace. I mean, that's kind of the end goal of the Charge at Work program. It's not more complicated than that. So we're going to help you get through this as easy as possible. You can see on the screen now, we show you the different chargers that you can have. We'll also show you kind of the cost estimates, what this timeline will look like, what kind of resources and people and companies that you should reach out to make this even easier for you. So again, I'll show you some of the last screenshots here. A beautiful tool. This will be available very soon. I'm going to give you guys some links in just a second so that you'll be able to follow up on this. As soon as this tool is launched, it'll be available for everyone and we can walk you through more of the process there. So beautiful tool here. So I want to leave you guys just with the basic steps that we're asking for. The Charge at Work program is a non-committal pledge. It's something just to really assist you all with transitioning your business or your company over to electrification. So you can sign up for updates at chargeatwork.com, start building your project builder, and take the Charge at Work pledge. You can get this all done over the work break if you want to take a stab at it. I'm going to put my email in the chat in just a second. So if you do have any burning questions, anything like that, I'd love to answer these. If you want to learn more about the program, I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about it as well. The last thing I want to leave you with is a little bit of that eval program. So the eval program is a complementary program to the Charge at Work program. This is another blue ribbon certification for workplace charging. You can earn bronze, silver, gold, or platinum levels of certification. And the way that you earn the different levels of certification is by filling out our eval questionnaire, and it asks you questions about your company's efforts towards employee engagement and e-mobility needs, planning and evaluation of workplace electrification, incentivizing EV adoption, expanding access to EV charging, showcasing sustainability through leadership. That's usually my favorite. We like to always kind of feature some of the leaders that are really kind of trying to lead this charge and be early adopters of workplace charging. So again, this is the Charge at Work program and the eval certification. I'll leave you all with some notes in the chat. And if anybody has any questions or anything they want to follow up on, I'd be happy to follow up with you. Again, Brandon Smith from EV Noir with the Charge at Work program and the eval certification program. Thank you all.
Thanks, Brandon. I've got a couple questions for you.
Absolutely.
What's the main target audience for this? I guess I know obviously like employers themselves or possibly like landlords. Are you dealing with, you know, the folks that might own the buildings, but you know, might have multiple tenants? But then I also know there was like a municipal pledge as well. So like, is it really you're trying to target like the government officials first and then let it trickle down into their entities, or are you trying to engage directly with like the businesses and landlords and or does it really matter? Is it all the above there?
No, great question. And the answer to that is both. So essentially the Charge at Work program is targeting not necessarily the business or the building owner, but mostly the tenants, about the person that actually employs the people that are going to be using the charging. That's what the Charge at Work program is mostly for. It's a level 2 charging program. So it's not necessarily for fleets. Let's say you're like UPS or FedEx. It's not necessarily for programs like that. It's more for, you know, the local mom and pop grocery store. It's more for the startup that works in Silicon Valley. It's more for companies that are actually employing people that can provide workplace charging in their parking lots or in their parking structures or whatever kind of campus they have. It's for universities. It's for people that do own apartment buildings. Not apartment buildings. That's more of the eval certification. And then with the eval certification, we are kind of attacking the municipalities. We're looking at getting politicians to sign on, whether you be a mayor or whether you be, you know, the leader of the Sustainability Council. We're looking to get different people to sign on for that program and to promote their dedication to electrification.
Okay, awesome. And then really first steps for anyone interested is really just going and taking that pledge and kind of sign up for the updates from there. That track or that project building tool is kind of like open to the, you know, you can log in and just start playing with it yourself. It doesn't, you're not necessarily like getting paired with a, you know, a particular staff member on your end where they walk you through a process. Is that correct?
So yeah, you can absolutely play with it yourself. I just put the links in the chat right there. So sorry if they're not showing up as hyperlinks, but those are all the links for the Charge at Work program, eval certification program. And then you can also connect with me if you have any further questions. But the project tool is actually going to be live soon. We're beta testing it now. So when that's live, you can play with it all by yourself, but you can also reach out to anybody on the CalStart staff, the EV Noir staff, and we can actually help walk you through it. That's part of what we're doing here, is providing that dedicated team member that's going to help you through, kind of like an account manager will help you through the process, answer any kind of questions for you. And then obviously, you know, we'll let you go and let you fly on your own wings once you get to the point where you're actually getting stuff installed, but we can be there through the entire process to help you get through there and really work through the plan of action there.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for Brandon?
I have a question. Brandon, my name's Tara. I work with municipalities in the capital region. And I'm just curious, are you guys promoting, you know, the networked level twos, or are you trying to? Because we've seen a lot of communities install the networked ones and they're struggling now with subscription costs and, you know, maintaining those fees as well as maybe paying for, you know, charging people, what do they charge? You know, it's an interesting situation. And I think some communities now are thinking, let's do non-network chargers and just eat the cost of the energy and make it free, but also not have to pay for that. So I'm just curious what your take is on that and where you're kind of guiding, you know, businesses, communities to consider it.
Yeah, no, great insight there. I've been in the industry for a little while and I've worked with both the non-network chargers and the network chargers. And I just, for one, I've been on the phone with ChargePoint for hours at a time. So I think I understand kind of your frustration there. So the charger work and the eval program are both charger agnostic. We don't really deal with any particular type of chargers. We try to provide you with the best options. And that's also a great conversation that we'll have with you about the benefits of either going with either one of those. So we'll try to work with you. Sometimes different cities have different incentive programs or might have different promotions that it's better for them to use a network charger or a non-network charger. It really depends. As the ecosystem is starting to develop, we try to keep options as wide as possible. So the long, short, the answer is both.
Okay, that's helpful.
Anyone else? Okay. Hearing none, well, thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate the information. We're gonna put all this into the notes and hope, you know, we'll get this on our website. So if there's any questions from others, we can always point them to this presentation. And certainly, we'll be, you know, letting folks know in our region when we get asked about workplace charge, and I'll try to send them your way.
I appreciate you all. If anybody has any additional questions, you know, please feel free to email me. You can check out our website as well. And anybody at the CalSTART website as well can help you all. And I'm sure you guys, some of you all will probably receive some email communications from us from a different channel. So, you know, look out for that. That's us too. With pleasure to speak with you all today.
Thanks, Brandon. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Todd to talk about the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. Todd?
Yes, thank you. So the Capital District Regional Planning Commission has been involved with sustainability initiatives around clean energy and climate action planning for quite a while now, particularly through two state programs, NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities Program and the New York DEC's Climate Smart Communities Program. And we have a team of outreach coordinators, three of which are on this call in the capital region, but we also, because of the work we do with the state, we manage contracts that cover basically half of upstate New York. We cover 4 regions with our support. So we have a whole team across those 4 regions, and there's a team across the whole state managed in other parts of the state as well. And we have been working with these communities on clean energy and climate smart initiatives. And we saw an opportunity with the federal government recently to apply for monies through this Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program to do a climate action plan for the capital region. So this is specific just to the capital region, and it was basically a grant that was available to certain regions within the state, 3 others besides ours, the Buffalo region, the Rochester region, and New York City metro region. And then the state itself is doing a climate action plan that applies to the whole state, except for those 4 regions who are doing their own more specific plans. And so we applied and got that money to start that program in August. And so we have been in a process of developing the first phase of the climate action plan, working with some key regional stakeholders that are organizations like the Transportation Council that have focused on some of the sectors in which there are greenhouse gas emissions, because we're basing this basically around the idea of understanding different sectors where the greenhouse gases come from, whether it's residential or whether it's electric or it's power generation or whether it's transportation or whether it's waste or agriculture, et cetera. And so we are developing a plan that's based around the mitigation of those greenhouse gases. So it's not a resilience and adaptation plan, it is a mitigation plan and reducing greenhouse gases. There's 2 phases to the program, maybe not what we would have done if we had our own approach to just developing a climate action plan, but we have to follow the dictates of this program, which essentially breaks it into 2 phases. It breaks it into a priority climate action plan, which is a more high level targeted, shorter term plan, which we're in the midst of now, and which is due March 1st of next year. And then we will continue to develop a comprehensive climate action plan, which will take place over another year after the priority climate action plan is completed. And then we'll have that developed. So what's the difference? Well, the priority climate action plan essentially asked us to prioritize some key sectors that had, and we prioritize residential and transportation since they have the largest greenhouse gas footprint in our region. They're the largest emitters of greenhouse gas in those sectors. We know that because we did a greenhouse gas inventory based on 2010 data. So we have a community by inventory that goes down to the community level. So any community can look up its greenhouse gas footprint through our inventory and understand where their emissions are coming from. And we're using that inventory as a starting point for what we call PCAP, the Priority Climate Action Plan. And then we will be updating that inventory with a whole new inventory based on the most recent data under our Comprehensive Climate Action Plan phase next year and into the following year. So what we've done so far is a series of stakeholder meetings focused on residential and transportation sectors, but we also have had stakeholder meetings around the waste sector. And in our plan, we will be touching on strategies for all the sectors. But again, this is a more high-level targeted approach since the timeline is so short, and the focus of it being essentially develop strategies for GHG reduction in each of those sectors. So how are we approaching those strategies? We are reaching out to groups like the Transportation Council and CDTA, the Transportation Authority, and the Clean Energy Hub Coalition, which focuses on residential electrification, weatherization, and disadvantaged communities. And that's a program that the Affordable Housing Partnership of Albany takes the lead on with a coalition of other groups, and that's funded through NYSERDA. And some other groups that are focused on waste reduction, and we've been having meetings essentially to get from them the kind of strategies they, in the case of the Transportation Council, pretty much already have, pulling through their existing planning work and making sure that we're not recreating the wheel. We are essentially creating a container that allows the inputs from the different groups that have what we'll call jurisdiction over those particular sectors. And so we won't be able to do extensive outreach in this first phase, but we intend to do extensive outreach in the second phase. I say that, but I should say that in this first phase, we have had numerous meetings with the different regional stakeholders. I've done presentations to various groups, disadvantaged community groups, and have been getting the word out. We put out an e-blast about the program when we first started it, and we're about to launch another one this coming week, which basically is going to highlight that we now have a website specific to the program off of our cdrpc.org primary website for our organization. And within that website, we will be putting the PCAP and the CCAP for public consumption and prior to its finalization for comment. And we also have developed a greenhouse gas dashboard based on the existing inventory. So you can go on that site now, you can go to the dashboard, you can look up your community or multiple communities, you can compare communities, and you can look at where your emissions are coming from. And so that's basically what we're doing right now, is we're just in that phase of now that we've gathered strategies from our regional stakeholders, we're putting that together into a document that we hope to complete in another month and to post as a draft for another month of comment before the March 1st deadline. Now, there's one other piece to this. So why would the EPA make us do a priority climate action plan that we have to knock off in 6 months? And by the way, it covers an 8-county region, or 8 counties in this region. So we define it as the Regional Economic Development Council boundaries that correspond with state programs that from NYSERDA, from DC and other state programs. So we expanded beyond our MSA footprint, if you will. But the reason that the EPA wanted all the grant recipients to do this is because they simultaneously announced a grant implementation program for clean energy projects in September, a month after we started our program. And those clean energy project proposals are due 1 month after our PCAP is due, so they're due April 1st. The projects are large. They have a minimum of $2 million and upward and a maximum of $500 million. And so they're basically projects that would need to be already thought of and already kind of ready to go or could be implemented within the next 5 years, and basically would have to be lashed together in a short few months. And they would have to point to our PCAP and the strategy in the PCAP or strategies in the PCAP that support that project. And so the whole idea behind the PCAP really is to create strategies that support project implementation. And so that's where we're getting broad feedback. We're developing those strategies. And if anybody who is an eligible applicant or a partner with an eligible applicant, which is primarily municipalities or public bodies of some sort, the grant funding isn't available for not-for-profits or businesses in this implementation phase, and you think you have a project, you want to make sure it fits within our PCAP, you just need to contact me or of course examine the PCAP itself once we post it in February. But you probably want to find out ahead of time if you had an idea, and we would make sure that we have a strategy in there, if we don't already, that supports your project type. And so that's I think the gist of what we're doing here. And so it's a kind of a fast track in the beginning, and then an extensive outreach process over another year. And then we're going to work on it after that with a lot of education and outreach and potentially looking for other grant funding. Maybe it's not EPA, but it's maybe other sources that can support just ongoing climate action in the capital region.
All right. Thank you, Todd. Any questions for Todd? I know there was a lot there. Any questions, feel free to chime in.
I've got a very personal question, but I'll catch you after this.
Very good. Okay, so hearing none, thank you, Todd. Again, appreciate the information, and we can move on to, also I'll mention, so Haley posted, a link to some additional information in the chat. So I can post that, in the meeting minutes afterwards, copy and paste these links in there. So moving on, to some of the, Clean Communities Coalition agenda items. First one being our strategic plan. If you've been to any of our other meetings this year, this has kind of been an ongoing topic. So again, just real quick, this year, the U.S. Department of Energy in our Clean Communities contract added the requirement for a coalition strategic plan, which is really kind of, they're asking us to outline kind of a framework for our organization and a kind of a 3 to 4 year plan on establishing some goals and our, a framework to achieve those goals. So we've been running this by our stakeholder group. Components of the plan are just general timeframe, mission and vision statements, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats analysis, which we kind of worked through with this group, I think back in June or July, establishing some measurable goals. And then finally, the framework to meet those goals. So again, we've kind of run all of this through this group at least once already. So I just kind of wanted to go through and kind of, read through where we're at right now. Our draft strategic plan has already been submitted to DOE in October. And we have a little bit of time to make any final tweaks if we need to, but the final, strategic plan is due to DOE in January. So just real quick, we're still calling it a draft mission statement. This mission statement is kind of an existing one that we had prior. We're not making a whole lot of changes to it. But, I'll go and read it, I guess, just for the sake of detail. So our mission is to take the alternative out of alternative fuels. To do this, we must reduce dependence on foreign and petroleum resources, reduce vehicle emissions, enhance the development of an alternative fuel vehicle marketplace in the capital region, accelerate local hybrid and electric vehicle sales, promote informed consumer choice on fuel economy, and encourage use of idle reduction technologies. We're doing this by connecting consumers with producers and suppliers and providing high quality tools, resources, and training to our members. Think outside the barrel and join us today. So again, a lot of that was an existing mission statement. I think we might have made a few tweaks to it based on comments we had earlier this year. But essentially, we're looking to promote alternative fuels, help with consumers, fleets, and encouraging, really, any fuel efficiency techniques outside of just alternative fuels, outside of just electric vehicles. That is a big part of the Clean Communities Coalition, is that we're fuel neutral. Although a lot of the conversation is typically around electric vehicles.
So Jacob,
especially recently.
I wanted, I'll ask maybe I already know the answer to this question, but when I read that and it says reduce dependence on foreign petroleum resources, why doesn't it just say dependence on petroleum resources? Are you
Yeah.
required to put that in?
Well, no, I don't think we're required to. I do think that that's a remnant. It could be eliminated, I guess. So my understanding, at least when I first came here, I think it was like 2017. The administration at the time, there was some of the messaging was, from DOE was like, kind of, let's focus on the economic benefits and like reducing the foreign dependence side of it versus, saying emissions reductions and, climate change, things like that. It was kind of just a bad word. So I do see what you're saying. And ultimately, since then, that language, they're not as strict on it. So I do think that's a remnant of that. And we could probably just nix that and have it be, petroleum consumption. So good comment. Any other thoughts on mission statement? Hearing none. So mission statement and a vision statement to go along with this. Our vision is to support a cleaner, more equitable, more efficient transportation system that will help contribute to the success and overall quality of life in the capital region and support the goals outlined in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So this is, I think, in our conversation earlier this year, it was noted that this should be aligned with the CLCPA, which I think makes a lot of sense. So the second half of this, I tried to just throw in some of the general language from the CLCPA scoping document, which I think it kind of gets a little wordy, but ultimately we're showing what's there. So specifically a reduction in economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions of 40% by 2030 and 85% by 2050 from 1990 levels. Transition to nearly all new light-duty vehicle sales and almost half of new medium and heavy-duty vehicle sales being zero emissions, and a substantial portion of personal transportation in urbanized areas will shift to public transit by 2030. And by 2050, nearly all vehicles in New York State will have zero tailpipe emissions, and New Yorkers will have substantially greater access to low carbon modes of transportation, including public transportation. So again, a little wordy, but I think it's, it aligns well with the work that we are trying to do here. And ultimately, bringing in the public transportation side of it as well, which typically isn't as much of a Department of Energy message in terms of our contract, but it certainly aligns well with like the MPO side of things, and a lot of the work that we do does support public transit and BMT reductions as well. Any thoughts on the mission or the vision statement?
I was gonna make a comment regarding the mission statement, going backward. I was wondering, should infrastructure be involved, anywhere included in there? I don't think I saw it.
Yeah, I think that's,
Or is that something that
no, I think
kind of
that's,
removes that
Um,
you're versus promoting the technology itself versus infrastructure is a little bit more, I would say, more from the ground up? Is that something that we don't think?
no, I mean, I definitely, well, infrastructure meaning like charging stations, fueling stations, or like
Yeah.
transportate, like roads, bridges.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
like, yeah, the like hydrogen infrastructure or electric
Yeah.
vehicle infrastructure, any kind of,
no, I definitely think adding a,
'cause that-
an infrastructure
yeah,
piece in there is deserved.
I just want to call it clean energy infrastructure,
Yeah.
something like that. It's not confused with a new bridge.
just because they kind of go hand in hand, I would say.
Yeah, we're both, yeah, I see what you're saying. In there, it's a lot of like the vehicle.
Right.
I just want to wait for you to finish writing. Different topic. I was just curious if any of your mission has to do with like reducing BMT, or is that more kind of outside of this DOE? work?
So, yes, but so ultimately, and I mean, you guys may have known some, like, right, there is the division between the MPO and the Clean Cities Coalition, and ultimately that's, we get funding from DOE to perform, a contract, which, they kind of tell us what the work we should be doing is. And historically, that's always been very, alternative fuel specific. So, if we were to say, hey, we're gonna go work with CDTA to help them find, a better route, they would say, well, that's not real, with a diesel bus,
Yeah.
that's not really what the coalition. However, since we're within the MP, we always, that's always a good thing. We'll support it. So in this sense, ultimately, we wouldn't be able to like spend our money on stuff like that, if that makes sense.
No, that totally
Even
makes
though
sense,
it's
yeah.
still, it would still drive towards the mission of emission reductions and, reduction in fuel use and things like that. So that's kind of where it is a little like, and ultimately, this is our mission statement. We're gonna submit this to DOE. I doubt they would say like, no, absolutely not, something like, this is ultimately gonna be the coalition's document that we're holding ourselves to. Just ultimately, we technically can't like spend our money on that directly. There's obviously, you can get into like the fringe of, it's
Yeah.
like we're
There's
working
overlap.
on, a mobility hubs project with CDTA where it's, looking at, how can they better design their hubs that have transit, drive, cycle, kind of all in the same location. And, they're not saying we're only using electric buses or electric bikes, but it's just kind of the idea of that is supported by this, so.
Okay,
So
That's
that's kind of
helpful.
why it's not as explicit of like supporting transit and BMT reductions. Or bike and ped infrastructure.
Like for this, my reaction to this is that you just stop after your first sentence and don't get into the specific.
The mission or the,
The vision, no, the one, the second one.
The vision, right, to not even get into the,
So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
whatever the CLCPA is what we support.
right,
Why and
so
why.
end right there, where
Yeah.
you're pointing before specifically, and then not lay out all the
Yeah, it's
details, and
just
just
cleaner.
leave it as a clean vision statement.
Yeah. Cause that, you know, I mean, who knows? That's from the scoping document as time goes on.
Things
That-
change.
that Could be different tomorrow.
Yeah,
Well, vision can never be specific if you're trying to understand the future 40 years from now, or however many, 30 years.
Okay, next, so our goals. So again, these are kind of like very broad goals that we're gonna lay out for ourselves over the next 3 or 4 years. Want them to be, you know, achievable, specific, and time down. So, you know, time down being our 3-year window. First one, help at least 2 stakeholders access funding for new alternative fuel vehicles or infrastructure. I think this is one that, you know, me personally, I want to focus on the next year. You know, there's a lot of funding out there. A lot of times we might be doing a webinar or something. I would really like to be able to work more closely and, you know, helping a stakeholder get their hands on funding. So that's a big goal, you know, internally here. 2, become more recognizable, as an alternative fuels resource in the region. You know, I think number 1 is gonna kind of help us snowball there. It's probably been a while since we've had a, you know, a big grant or something access through the program. So as we can, you know, if we can do that, we can kind of build some momentum and kind of become more of a resource for our communities. 3, increase dedicated coalition staff by 1. You know, and this is something that we, Sandy and, you know, others in here, we're actively working to bring on a new staff member that can be kind of clean communities first. So that we make sure that the program's getting the attention that it needs. And then add 5 stakeholders in or with impacts in an environmental justice area. So as we all know, right, EJ and Justice 40 are big right now. The Clean Communities Program, I believe, is, you know, we're subject to the Justice 40 requirements. So that's, you know, on our reporting to DOE, that's something that's on there, and, you know, certainly something that we want to, you know, make sure that we're, you know, have a presence in EJ areas, so.
Does LGBTQ qualify as justice in this or not?
Not in the term, you know, not in the definition that were used at the DOE level. And there's actually, you know, whether you're looking at NYSERDA's map or the federal map, they're kind of more, you know, census blocks that are more socioeconomic based on what's highlighted, in terms of the areas that we're focusing in. But, yeah, so not necessarily, more geographic area that we could say, you know, there's a business that's emitting emissions here that, you know, wants to transition to alternative fuels, where you can say, okay, there was an impact there. So then the programs and activities are what's gonna help us meet those goals. Kind of laid it out where, our external programs are going to help deliver impacts to goals 1 and 2. And these programs are really kind of, you know, what's laid out in our Clean Cities contract. So this is kind of the work that we do on a typical basis, you know, by contract through DOE. So education and outreach activities, quarterly webinar programs. So right now we kind of, you know, try to have a webinar or an engagement session, maybe like as needed, or when we you know, have a stakeholder or a community member bring something up, and we'll try to put a webinar together. I think that we want to be more proactive about having a regular schedule, and maybe kind of like series or something that can be on the calendar where we know, and our stakeholders know that, hey, let me check in, let me see what this month or this quarter's, session is gonna be on. So we want to be more regular about that. Establishing an annual alternative fuels event in the region, I think this is one that would, really kind of help us, move the needle on alternative fuels, but also, gain a little bit of momentum for the coalition, and is if we can put together a annual kind of flagship event, with some of our stakeholders that's bringing, all types of alternative fuel vehicles and stakeholders together, for a day or two, in a centralized event. And then growing online social media presence. This is something that we have, but I'm sure some of you all know, to really, stay on social media, you've got to always be coming up with content and sending it out. And, we know that we can do a better job of that and making sure that folks know about the work that we're doing. And then also our technical assistance activities, that would be specific, assistance with grants, any regional planning, specifically EV planning. We've had an regional EV plan in the past. I think we last updated it in 2020. So that's something that we kind of want to take a look at and see if it's time for an update. A lot's changed in just a few years. And then our total cost of ownership analysis. We have access to a tool that we've used to help municipalities before, and private fleets. So that's one that, we want to continue to keep moving and keep doing work in that as well. And then internal activities. The idea is that these are going to help deliver impacts to goals 3 and 4. Increased coordination with host agency staff. So again, not only, bringing on new staff members, but, right now, kind of the way we operate, it's 1 or 2 of us as staff that do a lot of the clean communities work, but there is staff members, where there's some overlap of things that we're doing on the MPO that we could probably tap them, and bring in some projects and, bring in a little better perspective in our clean communities world by bringing some of our MPO staff in. Specifically, TDM is one of those things where, where we're kind of blending that line, and we have some ride share programs and car share programs and shuttle programs that we have staff that are involved in planning that can really reduce VMT. So, it is something that I think the folks at DOE are starting to give a little more leniency on. So as we do that, we can, try to bring in more MPO staff. Develop a job posting for clean cities. We've actually already started this. You guys may, we've been interviewing, so we might have a new staff person on very soon. So we've got our fingers crossed. And then increase clean city staff training opportunities. There's, trainings through Department of Energy that we can bring more staff to. There's other, fleet events and alternative fuel vehicle events and trade shows, across the country that typically we aren't going to, that a lot of other coalitions go to, that I think could really, benefit our staff, benefit the coalition to go out and kind of get that information on the latest technologies and bring it back to our stakeholders. So, we want to continue, or start to do more of that thing for the sake of the coalition.
I was gonna make
Yeah.
one comment. So for program 1 for external program, in the past, have you done like case studies or, just kind of like best practices and using local examples?
Yeah, we have, kind of on a case, we've done that a little bit through our technical assistance program.
Yeah.
Where that's another one that like we kind of try to blend it with the MPO, where if somebody reaches out to us for technical assistance and it happens to be on like the electric vehicle side of things,
Yeah.
or on Todd or Tara might have been involved. We did the one with Colony on kind of like case studies for EV planning or zoning policies.
Okay.
But yeah, it's certainly something that we could.
Yeah, like
fit
I guess what I
into
mean
our-
is maybe more like procurement or just kind of like going through their thought process.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't done it to that
Okay.
specific, but that would be, I think that would fall under technical assistance
Okay.
somehow.
Yeah.
Or if there was, maybe if you're thinking like, a training session or
Yeah.
something that's like, hey, here's a community that's,
Right.
used this grant program or done this
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Let's bring others in the room and they can hear from them.
Yeah.
What haven't you done in the past? I thought, Tara, you were saying this, like a fleet analysis for a municipality.
Yeah,
So where does that fall on here? Would it be that third bullet number 2 or?
yes, yep. Yep, that's exactly what that would be. Total cost of ownership, and that's where we, at least in the past, we've taken their entire fleet. You could do it as little as, okay, you want to do a 1-to-1 vehicle comparison, you're gonna, buy a Chevy or, buy a Ford Mach-E instead of a Chevy Equinox. And then you could multiply it out, or we could look individually at different vehicles and, I think in that case, we kind of took each fleet group and whittled it down to, just a little bit of averaging to say, if you've got maybe a 2 Ford Fusions and a Chevy Equinox and, all right, let's just say that you were gonna buy Chevy Equinoxes and actually in that particular case or in a couple of them, like a lot of times the munis are saying, well, when we buy vehicles now, they're using, they're gonna buy an SUV because it's the most useful. So, it's kind of like, well, let's look at what the electric alternative to that vehicle is then. So, but yeah, that's where this would fall. Any other thoughts on this?
Jacob, this is Mary Ellen from New Albany. Just wondering the time frame of the goals, like are all within the next year or are some of them within the next couple of years?
Yeah, so, like the main goals that I showed on the 2 slides ago, I would say, that's like our 3-year. This document is a 3-year document. Where these goals on this page, are, a quarterly webinar program, we would expect that, this year. An annual alternative fuels event this year. Maintain and grow online social media presence, it's kind of ongoing. But all of these would be, I think we would want to touch on all of these bullets at least a little bit this year. And then those main goals that we showed earlier would be kind of a longer timeline, but actually in a slide or two, I'm gonna mention it. Kind of what I see this going in the future, and it would really be like, part of these quarterly meetings, would be touching in and saying, are we meeting these goals? Are we on track to fulfill this document essentially? Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Like we do this SMART goals at U Albany. So I know usually they have this like, right,
Yeah.
by December, whatever, like the day we want to have the goal accomplished. I guess my only other question was, I think, the second one, when I first, on the previous slide, the second goal, when I first saw it, I was just wondering how that would be measurable. But now that you've gone to the slide with the specific actions, it was, I kind of see how you're thinking, how these activities would be emblematic of being a recognized leader.
Yeah. Okay, and so an org structure. So this is something that, I don't know if we've ever really like put on paper before. So I thought it was helpful, in this document that we're putting together, so I figured I would show it to you all. And so really, you know, and feel free to ask questions, because I know, I think some of you are familiar with how we operate, others may be not as familiar. So, right, we're the MPO Transportation, the Capital Region Transportation Council now is our host agency. I've mentioned it, we've received funding from the Department of Energy to host the Clean Communities Coalition. So, you know, we're still kind of under the umbrella of the MPO. And so we have our host agency executive director is, you know, truly at the, you know, the leader, you know, ultimately with the final decision on, you know, funding and what we can do and what we can't do. We use some of our host, agency admin staff. You know, they're kind of the liaison between the Department of Energy and the feds to, you know, draw down our funding and, you know, pay the bills, so to speak. And then myself as the coalition director, is kind of tasked with executing, our Clean Communities plan every year and making sure that the tasks, set out by Department of Energy are, you know, are completed. And we complete all our reporting requirements and so on. And then, you know, we have right now really one other dedicated staff member, which is Chaim, who's online. And then we're looking to add an additional, you know, staff member who, again, there is no 100% coalition staff members. There's just, we have staff members that are, you know, more heavily tasked with coalition activities. So, and then on the left, we have our coalition stakeholders. So, you know, I think it's also important to, you know, at least lately, these meetings have been a little lightly attended, but we do want to, you know, hear from you all as stakeholders, as members. You know, if there are certain projects, if there's a direction that, you know, you would like to see the coalition take, we're happy to hear those, you know, happy to hear those thoughts and recommendations. And ultimately, you know, if it's a project, if there's an issue that you're having, you know, we're always happy to look into that. You know, the only thing would be is, you know, we do have some guidelines from DOE. You know, can we work on this? Can we work on that? But you know, we want to hear from stakeholders and we want our stakeholders to help kind of lead the conversations and lead the coalition. So any questions on our org structure? So next steps, right? What does all this mean? We've got a strategic plan that DOE asked us for. So we have our draft again. You know, we have to submit the final one by January. I've got a few tweaks I can make from what we heard here today. Ultimately, you know, this is going to be kind of a check-in document for us going forward. I see this as, you know, we might have you know, an ongoing bullet on the agenda for quarterly check-ins. How are we meeting these goals? You know, or have we done our webinars? Have we met with a stakeholder yet for technical assistance? Things like that. And then, you know, potentially at the end of each year, we might be able to say, hey, you know, hey, do we need an update? Do these still make sense? So that's how we see this moving forward. Any other thoughts on that? That's the end of our strategic plan strategy. And I know a lot of that is internal, so maybe some of you folks are like, you know, why are we hearing this? But I just wanted to make sure there was input. I think we got some good input on this, but you know, so this is kind of what we're putting together to try to help guide the future. And as we do bring on new staff internally, you know, I think this is a good way to have a document that says, you know, this is really what we're here for. And this is the direction that we want to take.
So just a thought that it might be worthwhile, given that this is federal funding, our EPA program is federally funded or granted by a different agency, but I don't know how much DOE and the EPA coordinate, but they have mutual objectives on some levels. And so in our climate action plan, as you've seen, there's basically a series of strategies for transportation. And a number of those apply to what we're doing here.
Mhm.
So it might be worth it to be you know, just to have some mention of how you're basically tied into supporting those strategies. That over time, as we develop these strategies, one of the things that we have to do with our climate action plan is to identify what the federal government calls authority to implement. Sounds kind of a bureaucratic term, but really it's like, all right, you've got strategies, how are you gonna make them happen? And some of those involve what you're doing with this coalition. So I think just having kind of a recognition that some of those strategies, this coalition is helping to play a role, with particularly around alternative fuel, which we have direct strategies for that. It just seems like a good kind of mutually supportive way of recognition of our coordination.
Yeah, okay, definitely.
And some of the stuff could help when we're doing our outreach next year. For example, you're doing a webinar on alternative fuels. Might be one of a series of transportation kinds of things we want to do
Yeah.
to just promote what's in the climate action plan.
Absolutely.
Because the other thing is one of, you know, the implementation project proposals. We don't know exactly what's bubbling up. And we don't expect that there will be many awarded in New York State. Maybe in the state's gonna be applying too, so we'll be competing with the state if there are any smaller applications, but. There is a coalition right now of transit authorities along the I-90 corridor that are having conversations about potentially submitting a clean fuel proposal for clean transit hubs. CDTA is part of that discussion.
Yeah.
So and one of the things that's being talked about is a kind of combination of things that transit agencies can do for clean fleets that's not just all electrification. And that includes the role of hydrogen, for example.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing because at least some of the feedback we've heard from New York State is that the state isn't necessarily as supportive of hydrogen as they are kind of all in electrification. But you are supportive of hydrogen and alternative fuels in general. It's kind of just pointing that out, that there's potential role, even because one of your tasks was supporting other funding sources and other things like that. And so maybe even depending on what comes out of, if there ultimately is a proposal from the transit authorities, there's going to be an implementation element to that if it's awarded, and even just developing the application, you know, would be right here in this region.
Yeah, and definitely, like, you know, I would say, right, when the time comes for that application, you know, we would certainly. And a lot of times I think it may be, you know, not as clear, like. When, you know, we're coordinating with you in some of these meetings, like. I'm there as clean communities, you know, and Jen, you know, and even though we're kind of all in the same. You know, in the same office or, you know, that's the way we're supporting that and, you know, ultimately letters of support and things like that, you know, we can always, there's two of them typically. So, yeah, definitely. I see where you're going with that. So that's strategic plan. The only other thing that I've got on our coalition news, which is, you know, something I think that you'll all find interesting. So another thing that Department of Energy has kind of been, you know, not really encouraging folks to do, but definitely like floating the idea a little more, is that, you know, and this is across the country, that, you know, they want to make sure that there's more coverage of the coalitions. There's about 75 coalitions nationwide. I think right now, like territory wise or population wise, it's almost 80% of the US population falls within a designated Clean Cities Coalition. In New York, we have 6 coalitions, but we don't actually, you know, on the map, our geographic areas, we still don't cover all 62 counties. There's quite a few gaps in the North Country and in the Southern tier. So, you know, DOE's kind of, you know, suggested, and the 6 coalitions have decided that we're going to take a closer look at how we can better you know, either coordinate or create some type of alliance. You know, we really don't know how we want to do this yet, and this is what, you know, we're basically going to kick off a study to see what the best way to better cover New York State is. And we're gonna be starting that in 2024. We just had kind of a soft kickoff call yesterday. Just to kind of align things, but we haven't really started anything yet. But we're really gonna look at ways on how we can create a more unified brand. How we can, you know, maybe pull some resources where there might be one website, that has better information, right? Some of our coalitions in New York State, particularly, the New York City Coalition, has 5 or 6 dedicated staff. That's all they do. They have, you know, a little bit more resources than we do here. And in, you know, some of the other coalitions are just 1 or 2 person staff as well. So we really want to take a look at how, you know, how can we strengthen our, you know, alliance or our presence across the state. Also, you know, if we're having a webinar series or something, you know, can we bring basically everyone across the state in to get, you know, better knowledge, better exchange of information? It also, you know, we kind of talked about some of the other folks, right? If we're one big coalition that covers New York State, that might be a little more attractive to national manufacturers or Cummins or, school bus manufacturers, when they might say, oh, like, hey, can we get a bus to demo or something? Well, you know, one coalition in Albany or one coalition in Rochester, they might, well, we don't really have. But if we can kind of pool together and say, well, it'll be in Buffalo on Tuesday and Rochester on Wednesday, and do, you know, we're hoping that we could figure out a way that we can kind of, increase our increase our presence by pooling resources.
So I can give you a recommendation, since there's a model out there. Because I helped create it and have been working and implementing it for the last 10 years now, or 8 years anyway. And this is the idea of a territory, which is a coalition of regions. And this is how we operate the Clean Energy Community Program and the Climate Smart Community Program for the state. So previously the state, and often the state, would give out grants to regions if they're regional based organizations, which is both of those programs are an interface between the state and local governments through regional organizations, right? Which is not all that different, except that you're beyond just local governments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we proposed the idea of a multi-regional territory to administer the programs. And that's what the model is. So where the Capital District Regional Planning Commission gets a contract from both DEC and NYSERDA that covers 28 counties. So it covers the North Country, the Mohawk Valley, the Hudson Valley, and the Capital Region. And then the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board does the western part of the state in the same fashion. And then there's an actual engineering company, Cameron Engineering, that does Long Island. And there's another group, Solar One, that does New York City. So there's really 3 contracts, because Long Island is a combination of, and New York are combined. So those programs are run through 3 contracts. Cover the whole entire
So the
state.
whole state is basically split up into 3
Territories.
territories.
That's right.
And they're REDC too, so
Yeah.
that's the definition of a region.
Yeah,
Whereas
so
yours is gonna be based on the DOE, so it's a little different, but.
Well, that's the thing, like, we can basically draw our boundaries. You know, the DOE isn't necessarily saying like, hey, this is what you have to cover. And actually, I think it was before my time, one of the folks on our call yesterday basically said that they thought that the boundaries that we have today somehow came from the Economic Development Council boundaries, but I don't think they're exactly.
how many counties do you have?
So we have technically our coalition boundaries are 12 counties. That's from Warren, Washington, down to Columbia Green. And then Fulton, Montgomery, and Otsego. But, you know, most of our work is in our 4-county region. just because, you know, the MPO, and that's where we spend a lot of our time. We have branched out a little bit, Warren County, Greene County. But, you know, it's just in my mind, when I look at that, you know, Otsego County, I don't feel like we have a lot of connection to Otsego County, especially when they're, you know, I just
Capital
get the
region.
feeling like that's more central New York, you know? So I don't, if that comes up in this, but then there is, you know, Franklin, Essex, Clinton aren't part of any coalition. Granted, again, the DOE doesn't necessarily, you know, if someone said, hey, can you come? Directors are allowed to kind of go do work where they think that it's gonna be beneficial and there's no, but,
Well, you need to have, if you were gonna expand this idea of expanding it for statewide coverage. Or I'll go backwards, your 12 counties, did you need agreements from all those counties to participate in your coalition?
I don't believe so. I mean, I don't, know. Maybe they did,
I mean, if you don't, then it's not, then it's just an exercise in drawing a map,
but,
so
right,
that way you can just get together and with recipients and say, what extra counties do you wanna take on?
yeah,
And as long as your organization is willing to spread its wings into other areas, which already has done through going out into 12 counties.
Yeah.
That's, you know, there's,
yeah, and I think though, this is gonna look at it a little more from like an organizational perspective too, though, of not just like, you know, how can we cover the whole state, right? I mean, yeah, we could just say that we're covering, you know, all the way up to Clinton County and,
well, the reason I'm saying that is the territory model isn't that CDRPC provides that outreach support to the 28 counties. It has the contract to cover those 28 counties, and then it's the subcontract with other regional organizations that are closer to their communities.
yeah.
So we have 3 other regional organizations like ours that cover those, but that's just throwing that out there,
Yeah.
as there's a
Well-
model out there that works to do this.
Yeah, I
through
mean,
those-
and I
through
definitely
those
think,
programs.
you know, when we get into this, you know, you might get a phone call from me to see what, you know,
Well, it's interesting when I look at the map right there, because that's the EPA regions that got their own climate pollution reduction grants are everyone up there except for Syracuse. Syracuse didn't have enough population to make the list. But those are the recipients of the EPA grants, Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, and New
Yeah.
York.
Who are the host organizations for the other, are they all MPOs or are they?
no,
No.
so we're actually like
Exception.
yeah, I mean, in New York State, we're the only one that's in an MPO. Across the country, out of those 75, I think there's maybe like 8 or 9 that are hosted in an MPO. So most of these are standalone nonprofits,
Okay.
which is going to be one of the more difficult, you know, just from the discussions of like, you know, there's talks of, you know, potentially, you know, joining forces and everyone's under a same contract with, where as an MPO, we have less flexibility to kind of, you know, do the same work that some of these other coalitions will kind of go out and they're getting contracts. And, you know, they're trying to make as much, you know, I mean, they're nonprofits, but they're trying to get as much, you know, grant funding as they can so they can bring on more staff and grow their coalitions. Where we don't necessarily operate like that. We kind of use our Department of Energy funding to kind of, you know, do our tasks that are outlined and, you know, we actually supplement it with some TL, but they're, you know, in the business of growing their brand, growing their coalition, and there's an idea like, you know, can they go after NYSERDA grants directly? You know, I think that's all things that we wanna kind of talk about in this,
You have to be
In this
careful
study.
because somebody's gonna snatch your money from you and take over the area.
Well, right.
Consolidate it into one state.
And I mean, that's, you
Organization
know,
that's
that's,
doing it all.
you know, right, that's 100%, and you know, every one of these coalitions, I think, is going into this with like, all right, we wanna grow, we wanna strengthen, but we don't wanna, you know,
Take on.
yeah, well, we don't want someone else running our coalition, right? And I think that everyone here, you know, we all know each other and work well together, but there's also some, territory, that's why there's funding for a 2-year study to make sure that
Right.
whatever happens, is agreed upon and in best interests of all the coalitions. So ultimately, I'm putting this out there as, you'll probably hear talks of this and, there could be changes to the Clean Cities landscape in New York for the better. I think there's also a potential that we do all this work and everyone's like, well, maybe we're just good the way we have it and we redraw some boundaries or something. And-
Well, the other thing is you have to be sensitive when you look at that map, right? This is a metropolitan focused coalition, series of coalitions as of now. Right? And if you're gonna talk about covering the North Country or Southern Tier or other places, Mohawk Valley, you're gonna be in a different political landscape.
Right, right.
And so that your messaging might have to be different as well, even the name Clean Cities Alliance, okay, well, in the North Country, there's what, one city,
Yeah,
right? Plattsburgh, so it's like, who are you appealing to?
right.
So like Clean Communities has rings better for smaller rural
And,
communities.
the idea of the Clean Cities program at its roots is that, homegrown community, so the further away you go from your kind of home office is if I go to Plattsburgh and someone's, some guy from Albany is here telling us what we should, the idea of it is that the folks that are doing the work are locally, the local experts, or they know the folks that are, so I do think it's gonna draw its own set of issues, but, nonetheless, that is what we're going to try to do over the next 2 years, so that is out there. Got about 5 minutes. Any other news around the table, folks online, wanna chime in on any work that they've been? Any alt fuels work?
I'll just mention we talked about it before everyone got in, but the new Clean Energy Communities program was announced. There's an expanded section with clean fleets, so, NYSERDA has added, different tiers for communities to purchase electric vehicles, to install charging stations. So basically before it was like, just do one and you get points. Now it's like do 6 and you get more points than you would get if you had one. They also unfortunately removed plug-in hybrid vehicles, which we felt was a little upsetting, but, yeah, your face was kind of my reaction as well, but, so they're encouraging communities to really go full electric, which, I think is a struggle for some communities because they haven't really made that transition yet and they're not really sure, about range and things like that. So, and then they have non-road vehicles in there as well. A fleet inventory is another thing that they're rewarding communities for now. And electric landscaping equipment, which, is tangential. So, just thought I'd mention that there's lots more money in that program too. So we're pretty excited that communities are gonna have this opportunity for 2 more years.
I don't know if you mentioned it, Tara, also there's, off-road vehicle, right?
Yes,
As
off-road
well,
vehicles, yep.
included, so.
So off-road vehicles would be like their construction equipment?
Yeah, so they have, construction equipment, so, cause they have a category for heavy duty.
Right.
Or medium and heavy duty is how they've grouped it together, and then they have light duty vehicles, but now they have off-road vehicles, so that would be anything that's not, considered on-road.
Like skid steer or forklift.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that, you know.
Electric boat.
ATV.
Yeah, there you go, electric boat, that was one that got in there, yeah, for sure.
Vehicles, I always told have wheels, and I don't have wheels, so I'm nowhere.
Put a spare tire on it.
There you
Well, a
go.
lot of municipalities do own, boats like the fire department or emergency management, so.
And why aren't they beating down my door?
Mm.
And Todd, you've got anything else, or
No, I've got it.
that was your update? David? Any
Uh,
updates?
do people know about the Canary Media Organization? Rocky Mountain Institute, does that ring a bell? Their media outlet is Canary Media. And they did a very nice article on solar electric boats just recently, which the Secretary of Energy put in her list of 3 things for the day, and it was the top one in her list for the day.
Right. Very good.
Got a link to that?
I don't have
Well,
any.
I can look it up. Maybe I'll throw it in for the minutes. Anybody online have any additional, alternative fuels updates?
We got the electric trolley this fall, so that's been an operation. It's been a hit for people visiting the university using it.
Is that just on campus?
Yeah, it's mostly an on-campus thing, although I think it can go, it can be off, it can be on the road, but it's mostly used to transport between the campuses and do tours.
Very good. Thanks, Mary Ellen. Anyone else? Hearing none. So with that, 2024 meetings, looking at the last Wednesday of each quarter. So March 27th, June 26th, September 25th, and December 18th. We'll be sending out those invites on our email blast. And so with that, that's all I have for today. Thank you all again for being here, and happy holidays.
Likewise.
Take care.